The Your Voice in Power Hour on the My Voice in Power show for Unity Live Radio. Hello and welcome to the Your Voice in Power Hour. How are you today?
Good, thanks.
Lovely. Would you like to tell us your name and a bit about yourself?
Yeah. My name is Rhiannon Stocking-Williams and I work for Reading Voluntary Action, which is an organisation that supports any kind of community action in a range of ways. I run something called the Ready Friends project, which is about supporting any kind of action from local people, from the really big groups like Age UK, through to a couple of neighbours wanting to do something in their street to reduce loneliness and social isolation. I guess first of all, I want to just say thank you so much for giving me this opportunity to tell you about a campaign that we launched 2 weeks ago in Reading, and about the need to support people facing loneliness and social isolation here. There's been lots and lots of research over the last 10 years or so about loneliness and social isolation, and it's very much in the public conversation, as well it should be. But for me, I think the particularly scary characteristic is that, statistic is that it's as harmful to us as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. And that's actually been proven with very robust research. So I guess one question is, why now? And what I would say is, as the result of the COVID pandemic, the number of people experiencing loneliness and social isolation is unprecedented. And many people are still not confident enough to go out through fear of catching it in shops on public transport, even if they've had all the jabs.
Yeah.
And a number of community groups and organisations across the town are reporting that it's getting harder and harder to recruit volunteers such as befrienders, because people might be supporting their own family members and friends still, or taking on extra paid work to cope with the cost of living crisis.
Yeah.
And some potential volunteers might also be vulnerable and choosing to self-isolate themselves. So there's a huge demand for people to support, and not everybody uses the word volunteering, of course. For some people it means one thing, some people it means another. So you can use the word volunteering, or you can use the word help out, support, befriend, care for people. I don't really care what people call it, as long as they do it.
Yeah.
And it really is the pandemic that existed before the COVID pandemic.
Okay.
And now it's 10 times 10 times worse because of the pandemic. So we really need to take action. So we've called the campaign Chat, Connect, Befriend, because I wanted to describe there are different kinds of support that you can offer people in different kinds of roles.
Yeah.
So people are often familiar with the term befriender. So you're matched, for example, with somebody in the community who's not getting out, and you visit them in their home, or maybe over the phone, or through online Zoom or something.
Okay. Sorry, I just wanted to ask, how are people matched? Is there a particular format that you go through, or you just pick by area? How does that work?
Yeah, it's a really good question, and it's the most important part of the process.
Okay.
So the organisations or community groups, and by the way, there are about 1,000 in Reading alone.
Really?
Which, yes, I know, people always go, wow, no. And I'm talking about the sort of the branches of national organisations, so the ones that we're familiar with, like Age UK, etc., through to the small street-based or friendship-based groups that organise themselves. But there's about 1,000 in Reading, and of course there was an explosion of WhatsApp and those kind of groups during the lockdowns and stuff. So we sort of include the mutual aid groups as well.
Yeah.
Organisations that take on volunteers, they understand that volunteers need induction, they need training, they need to be the right people in the right roles, you know.
Yeah.
People need to have, it's not for everybody, and people need to have a set of skills that, you know, obviously they can improve on and develop as a result of volunteering, but being things like a good listener, being non-judgmental, to have the ability to empathise and encourage people to reconnect with others and gain the confidence to go back out again.
Okay.
What I would say here, I just want to make a kind of big plug that there's a particular demand for befrienders who speak Urdu, Punjabi, Arabic and Ukrainian in Reading. So I really want to get the message out that anybody who speaks those languages, there's a number of organisations that would snap you up. So you get training and you get induction, but you also get strong supervision. You know, once you've signed up, the person in the organisation that you liaise with will get to know you, get a sense of what you're interested in, and the kind of person you are, and then they will match you quite carefully with people needing support. Now, it doesn't always correspond that somebody that you'll be put with somebody exactly like you, because sometimes that's not what people want.
Yeah.
People want, maybe you have one shared interest, but it's an opportunity to put two people together to learn from each other.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So, but the matching process is really, really crucial, and the people who are doing it have been doing it quite often for years, very skilled in it, because what they want is they want to make a match that you know sits well with both parties, the volunteer and the person that they're supporting, and will endure. So on that point, really, that befriending is likely if you sign up as a befriender, and I think this is probably, you know, only fair really, that the organisations have the expectation that you will do it for about a year as a minimum, because there are other roles which you can kind of come in and out of, but if you're supporting somebody who's an individual, and they can be quite a frail, vulnerable individual, you know, that once they've made the match and it's worked, they want to be able to rely on that person to phone them once a week or visit them once a week or whatever. And I think it's you know, reasonable to ask that sort of a year is a good time, a length of time to do it.
Yeah, consistency is key. So if a match doesn't work, people are just free to come and say they feel like it's not working? Is there support?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, the expectation is that you will be honest and you will give feedback to the person, the volunteer coordinator or your supervisor. And they should be checking in with you, you know, frequently during the the first few weeks. And then, I mean, in a way like paid work, you know, you don't get supervised every week like for years. But you should be reporting anything that is of concern to you, so you get some training around safeguarding, so that you know, it's very rare that it happens, I would say, but you need to be able to know what the worrying warning signs are for somebody who's very vulnerable, who might be taken advantage of by other people. So anything that's of concern you can talk through with the supervisor. Most of the time they won't need to really take any action, but if the match isn't working out, it's going to be really unsatisfactory for both parties. So it's better to deal with it early on, and it might be that there's something that can be done to make that match work between you, which is, you know, happy days. If it doesn't, then the organisation will need to find that person another befriender, and the befriender another person to support. So it doesn't always work out, because we're human beings. We're not, you know, computers that you can, you know, match up. But I think the instances of that happening are quite rare, because the matching process is, you know, quite a sophisticated process undertaken by people who've been doing it for a while. So yeah.
Is the training that you provide, is it free?
The training is always free, and you shouldn't, as a volunteer, be asked to pay for anything, and we don't know of any organisations that would charge volunteers to do anything, but certainly the training is free, and expenses. Most organisations will pay out-of-pocket expenses for volunteers, so they will pay if they're driving to and from the person's house, or getting the bus. They will be reimbursed for their mileage or their bus tickets. Because the last thing that we want is that organisations can only take on those volunteers that can afford to volunteer.
Yeah.
So that's why we encourage all organisations to pay expenses.
Okay. So there was something that you mentioned earlier that I wanted to just touch upon again. You were saying that loneliness has that much of an effect on the body, that it's as bad as smoking 15 fags a day. Sorry. So this reminded me of what they call ACE scores. Is that part of that?
I haven't heard of that before, no.
Oh,
it could be, but I haven't heard of that.
So no, so ACE scores is about the level of trauma you've experienced throughout your life, and different levels equate to different health problems that equate to, like, I don't know, having a high cholesterol diet with lots of fat will give you a heart attack. But if you've got a high ACE score, it's like equivalent to that kind of thing. So yeah, I just wondered, yeah, if it was the same, but yeah.
Well, the answer is I don't know, because I didn't know what ACE scores were, but I do now, and I'm going to look into it. So thank you for that. But but that's, I mean, the 15 cigarettes a day thing is such a shocker, but it just brings home to all of us that we need to take action on it. So, and different people are affected differently. So again, there's been within, you know, the research that's been done over the last years, it tells us that those already facing inequality are more likely to be lonely or face social isolation, and the impact of it will be more severe. So examples of those people are Black, Asian and minority ethnic communities. If you're disabled, if you have a physical or mental disability, if you're lesbian, gay, bisexual or transgender, if you live on a low income, if you live on your own. And there's a common myth that it really is an old people's problem, but actually more and more research is saying that more young people than old people are expressing the fact that they're experiencing loneliness and social isolation. So I mean, one of the things about the differences between young people and older people, and this is a real generalization, is that younger people now are more likely to talk about it and say it than an older generation that was told, well, just put up with it, you know. So, but, you know, if young people are telling us they're lonely, we need to listen and do something about it. And lastly, those people who are impacted by significant trauma, like, you know, you've just mentioned about trauma, or life change, such as abuse, bereavement, divorce, redundancy, empty nest when the children leave home, and even moving into a new area. So all of those things can trigger. So those are sort of situational and emotional and psychological as well.
So I think it's important for us to share as well that loneliness does not just mean that you are by yourself.
No, because social isolation is a fact. So that is somebody is socially isolated. That's a sort of situation, and you can be socially isolated and absolutely happy as Larry with that, because you're happy being alone, but you're not lonely. Now, loneliness is a feeling that can result from being socially isolated. So not everybody who's socially isolated gets lonely. And also not everybody who's lonely is socially isolated. You can be lonely in a crowd. You can be lonely in a big family. You can be lonely in a school, in a classroom. So the two are not the same, and one doesn't necessarily mean the other. And also the word, I mean, I mentioned about the word volunteering, and you know, we need to broaden how we describe it, because it means different things to different people. well, loneliness has, with some people, has huge stigma and shame, and especially older people. And that's what's been borne out by the research, that a lot of older people, again, were brought up in a, well, you just deal with it, you just shut up and you know, and deal with your situation, which is harsh at best and cruel at worst, really. But yeah, so we need to also think of the kind of words that we use to avoid the word. Yeah, we've been talking about, and I've been mentioning the L word, you know, loneliness a lot, but I think that the shame and embarrassment that some people feel, I think we, you know, it's good to try and maybe use some positive language when you start talking to somebody. Strike up a conversation with them. It can be about anything, you know, the weather, your recent holidays, sports, or whatever. And what I would say is, people are just usually happy that you noticed and paid them attention, even if they don't show it.
Yeah.
So, you know, one of the things that we can do is just have a chat to somebody.
So when you say about positive language, is there any particular words surrounding loneliness that you would use when you're having these kind of conversations?
Yeah, it's tricky, and I would say that the English language is not helpful.
No.
It's really not helpful, because we don't have a vocabulary around this. And when we start trying to look for other words, it's a bit sort of artificial and can be really clumsy. We don't have a word that is the opposite of lonely. And the closest, I mean, you can say unlonely, but what does that mean to anybody? But, so I think it's about, instead of, you know, saying, oh, are you feeling lonely, is, you know, when was the last time you got out? Or, you know, I haven't seen you for a while, you know, how are things? And just use open questions to allow somebody to come back. And you know, if they want to say, God, I'm feeling really lonely, then, you know, you've got quite a concrete starting point. But I think it's about reading between the lines of what people are saying. And what I would say also is to keep an eye out for family and friends and neighbours who could be lonely. A change in their appearance or their habits can be a sign that they've sort of tripped into feeling very lonely. But it's about, I guess, finding out what they would like to do, making some very gentle suggestions, and trying to pick on something that's positive. So if you're having a chat with a neighbour over there, over the sort of garden fence, and you know, you've noticed that they were perhaps a keen gardener and they've let their garden go a bit, is to say, you know, do you fancy a bit of a hand with that? Because you know, you used to grow those lovely dahlias, I really miss them. You know, just, you know, what were you not able to get seeds or something, or, you know, to try and get them to talk about their garden, and their garden has sort of maybe become a bit of a metaphor for their loneliness. So, do you know what I mean? Sort of picking on something, and that's not always easy with a sort of complete stranger, but is just to start the conversation somewhere and make it about them in a way that's not sort of confrontational, and gives them space and an opportunity to describe their loneliness in other words.
Great. So is there support for your volunteers when it comes to things like mental health? Because obviously you're going to come across some people that are probably in some real dire situations that maybe you weren't expecting, and like we touched upon earlier, trauma, so the loneliness might be really down to a real deep-rooted reason. Is there support? So obviously the volunteer is helping the person who was feeling lonely with their mental health, obviously to agree, because obviously some of it has to be passed on to yourselves. So do the volunteers get help for their mental health? They absolutely do.
What I would say is, it's not clear cut, you know, that you're somebody facing loneliness that needs support, and you're somebody who's a potential volunteer that's going to support them, because we can all be the same person. So what I would say is, volunteering can be a fantastic thing if you're experiencing poor mental health yourself and feeling lonely yourself.
Yeah.
So the act of volunteering, it connects you with somebody else, you're supporting somebody else as well, but at the same time, you're dealing with your own, you know, poor mental health or loneliness. So we're sort of, any one of us, you know, can be lonely, and any one of us can be a volunteer. So it's, we're sort of all on a spectrum, really. You are, as I've mentioned, supported in your role as a volunteer by a supervisor. Sure, you would have a named person that you can talk that through with, and they should be asking you, you know, regularly, you know, how are things with you? And it's about being honest with yourself and being honest with your supervisor. Your supervisor may be able to suggest some other things that that person can do that the volunteer can tell them about, because it's not the role of the volunteer to deal with people's mental health problems. So boundaries in this kind of role are really important. And again, you should have a supervisor that's looking out for you, or volunteer coordinator, you know, your liaison person in that community group, that also can sense where you might have overstepped the mark yourself as a volunteer, and you're getting too involved, and you're doing possibly too much. So it's about having boundaries around the role. And I know people listening to this might be thinking, oh, you know, that's all very well on a piece of paper, but actually in reality it's not so simple. And they're absolutely right, it isn't that simple, but it is about keeping a check on that. And part of your training will be these are the limits of your role. And if the person has greater needs, then that's when the volunteer coordinator or supervisor will say, well, there are a number of organisations that they could get involved with. Maybe they simply need to go back to their GP to start their talking therapies. There's this other community group that they might be interested in going along to that deals with mental health issues. So to protect the volunteer from getting too involved and overstepping, you know, the role that they're in. There's also training for volunteers quite often, and we encourage the local council, Reading Borough Council, to put on training for volunteers, and they put on some excellent, I mean, it's been all on Zoom obviously, but some really fantastic training on looking after yourself, knowing when when you're getting into deep water. Organisations locally have, like Reading Community Learning Centre, put on mental health first aid training. That's fantastic. That's quite intensive. So some people are able to commit to that kind of training, and other people need something that's briefer and more light touch. But the training is definitely available there.
Great, that is amazing. Thank you so very much. Would you like to share where people can find you, or would you prefer?
I'd love to. I'd love to. Gosh, I wouldn't be doing my job if I didn't. So what I will say is that it's very easy, I'm pleased to say, to volunteer. And the organisations at the moment that we know of who are recruiting befrienders, and I've mentioned befriender a lot. It's not just befriender, it's people in a support role. So it could be people who are in a lunch club, being a welcomer and a meter and greeter in a lunch club or a craft club. So in a group setting, as well as a sort of more one-to-one, or it could be that you are going to a person's house, picking them up and taking them to an activity as well. So it's not just the befriending, the traditional sitting with a cup of tea, having a chat for an hour kind of thing. And the kind of organisations in Reading are Age UK Reading, Engage, Befriending, Enrich, Me Too Club, and that's children with disabilities rather than adults. Support You, Sport in Mind, Reading Association for the Blind, but there's loads, there's loads more. So we've got a volunteering website that you can look on if you're able to get online, and it's rgneeds.me. So rgneeds, rgneeds.me. Put that into your browser, and you will go straight to our volunteering website, where you can browse the roles that are available, and there are hundreds, but you can do good keyword searches. And also you can click on a link where you can book a one-to-one meeting, and either in the library, which is where I am now, or on Zoom or over the telephone with one of our team, and you'll have a one-to-one conversation where they talk through with you the kind of things that you're interested in, maybe the kind of communities that you're interested in getting involved with and supporting, and then sort of do the matching with you then. The other, I mean, lots of people aren't online, of course. So what I would suggest is to phone our general number, and I will get back to whoever, you know, if somebody calls, and that number is 0118 937 2273, and we are Reading Voluntary Action. We've also got a website which is rva.org.uk, and on the homepage I've got a button there that you can click on a lovely photo of two women enjoying each other's company, and it just says chat, connect, befriend. You click on that and it will take you through to a page where it says a little bit about what I've been saying today, but we're also putting on sessions for no strings information sessions for anybody who just wants to find out more about what roles are available, the kind of, and to talk through the kind of things that I've mentioned today. And the first one is next Monday, the 8th of August. It's on Zoom between 1 and 2, so you don't have to go anywhere. And it's just for an hour, and it will be myself and my colleague Steve, who is the Volunteering Development Manager here at RVA. And we will be talking through, you know, the stuff that we talked about today, and the organisations that are looking to recruit volunteers. And I'm pleased to say that we will be showing, I think we'll be showing 2 videos that have been recorded by local volunteers to talk about the impact that they feel that they have had on the people that they've supported, and about the role. But also, nobody really goes into volunteering, I don't think, for personal reward. That really isn't the kind of general motivation. I've never met anybody anyway that did. They are trying to make a difference to other people, but what they always say is the reward was fantastic for them.
Yeah.
It, you know, whilst it's a sort of secondary thing, I would say that that's really important. It keeps you motivated. But fancy after, you know, a couple of weeks, you get a comment back from the person that you've been visiting or supporting, or in the group that you've been working with, that says something like, you know, you're the highlight of my week, or we had such a laugh today, I don't know what I'd do without you. I mean, fancy hearing that from somebody. That's such a lovely thing to know, that you're making a difference to somebody's life to that extent. Lovely.
Thank you for sharing, and it's been really informative actually, so thank you for coming on, and oh sorry, I can't find my words. Thank you for coming on and educating us all. Hopefully you'll get some good feedback. But yeah, thank you very much.
I hope so. Thank you so much again for having me. It's been fantastic, and I'd urge people just to get in touch with me, have a chat.
Great, thank you.
If you would like your voice to be heard on the Your Voice in Power Hour, then why not get in touch with me at myvoiceinpower@outlook.com.